At 4:20 in the morning on September 2nd, 2022, a dark GMC Terrain pulled slowly alongside a woman jogging alone on Central Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee. The woman was wearing a pink top. She had her earbuds in. She was running the same route she ran almost every morning before the rest of her neighborhood woke up. Within seconds, she was gone. A nearby security camera captured what happened in those seconds. The footage showed the SUV stopping, a confrontation, a struggle on the pavement, and then the woman dragged, forced, shoved into the vehicle before it pulled away into the dark. The entire abduction took less than a minute. Central Avenue was empty. Nobody was there to see it. Nobody called 911. The woman in the pink top was Eliza Fletcher. She was 34 years old. She was a wife, a mother of 2 young boys, a kindergarten teacher, and a beloved member of one of Memphis's most respected families. By the time the sun rose over Memphis that morning, she had already been missing for hours. And the question that would dominate the next 72 hours, the question that would eventually lead investigators to a convicted kidnapper living less than 2 miles from the scene, began right there, in that dark stretch of road, in those few seconds of surveillance footage that nobody saw until it was already too late. To understand who Eliza Fletcher was is to understand why this case affected Memphis the way it did. She was not a stranger to the city. Her grandfather was Joseph Orgill III, the head of one of the most established and philanthropic families in Memphis history. The Orgills had deep roots in Tennessee. They were the kind of family that built things, hospitals, institutions, community programs. They gave back. And Eliza, by every account of everyone who knew her, had inherited that exact spirit. She had graduated from the University of Tennessee. She had married Richard Fletcher III, a Memphis businessman. They had 2 boys together, young children, the kind of age where a mother is everything. She taught kindergarten at St. Mary's Episcopal School, a private school in East Memphis, where the parents who trusted her with their 5-year-olds described her the same way every time in the days after her disappearance. She was warm, she was dedicated, she showed up for her students the way she showed up for everyone she loved. Running was something she did alone in those early hours before the school day, before her boys were awake, before the rest of her life began. It was her time. She had run that route near the University of Memphis dozens, maybe hundreds of times. She knew those streets. She felt safe there. That sense of safety was not wrong exactly. The neighborhood around the University of Memphis is residential. There are houses and campus buildings and cars parked along tree-lined streets. At 4 in the morning, it is quiet, but it is not abandoned. It is the kind of neighborhood where people jog early. It is not the kind of neighborhood where someone expects to be dragged into a vehicle.
When Eliza did not come home from her run, her husband Richard reported her missing. Memphis police responded, and almost immediately, investigators identified something at the scene on Central Avenue that would break the case open faster than almost anyone could have predicted. There was a shoe, a single slide sandal, left on the pavement near the point where the struggle had taken place. It did not belong to Eliza Fletcher. It had been left behind by whoever took her, lost in the movement, the chaos of forcing a woman into a vehicle against her will. That shoe went directly to the crime lab. Meanwhile, investigators pulled every piece of surveillance footage they could find in the surrounding area. Cameras from nearby businesses, residential security systems, university cameras. They began piecing together the movement of the dark SUV, tracking it through intersections and side streets, building a picture of where it had come from and where it had gone. What they found deepened the urgency immediately. The SUV had not come from far away. It had moved through the neighborhood in a way that suggested familiarity, not someone passing through, but someone who knew the area, someone who may have been watching, someone who knew that a woman jogged that route in the dark before dawn. The shoe came back from the lab. The DNA on it belonged to a man named Cleotha Abston. Memphis police knew that name. Cleotha Abston was 38 years old in September of 2022. He had grown up in Memphis, and he had a criminal history that made investigators immediately understand how serious this situation was. In the year 2000, when Abston was just 16 years old, he had kidnapped a Memphis attorney named Scott Spicer in a mall parking lot. He forced Spicer into the trunk of a car. The attorney survived. Abston was prosecuted as an adult and sentenced to 24 years in prison. He served approximately 20 years before being released in 2020, just 2 years before the morning Eliza Fletcher went missing. 20 years. He had been out for 2 years, and now his DNA was on a shoe left at the scene of an abduction 2 miles from where he lived. Investigators moved fast. Within 48 hours of Eliza Fletcher's disappearance, they had identified Cleotha Abston as the suspect. On September 4th, 2 days after she was taken, Memphis police arrested him. He was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and tampering with evidence. But Eliza Fletcher had not been found. The city of Memphis held its breath through those 2 days. The story had moved from local news to national coverage. Her photograph was everywhere. People who had never met her knew her face. Parents at St. Mary's Episcopal School were trying to explain to 5-year-olds why their teacher was not there. Her husband, Richard, was speaking to investigators, speaking to cameras, asking for his wife to be returned. Anyone who watched those press conferences could see that the hope in the room was thinning with every hour that passed. On September 5th, 3 days after Eliza Fletcher was taken from Central Avenue, her body was found inside an abandoned property in South Memphis. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been murdered. She was found approximately 8 miles from the spot where she had been abducted, discarded in a vacant house in a neighborhood where properties sit empty and forgotten. The kindergarten teacher who had been running before dawn, who had 2 boys at home, who had spent her adult life building something warm and meaningful in Memphis, her life had ended in an abandoned building in the city she loved. The investigation that followed the discovery of her body moved with the kind of methodical pressure that serious homicide cases demand. Cleotha Abston was already in custody. The shoe DNA had connected him to the abduction. Investigators now connected him to her death. Evidence from the abandoned house, from the SUV, and from forensic examination built a case that prosecutors described as substantial and clear. Additional charges emerged. Abston was also accused of having kept Eliza's belongings, items from her that were recovered. His brother, Mario Abston, was separately investigated for allegedly helping clean the vehicle, tampering with evidence after the fact. But the central question that the investigation had to answer for a jury was not just what happened to Eliza Fletcher, it was how this had happened. How a man with a prior kidnapping conviction, a man who had kidnapped someone at gunpoint 2 decades earlier, been sent to prison for it and then released, had been living in the same city, 2 miles from where he would do it again. That question did not have an easy answer, and in the weeks and months that followed, it became one of the most debated aspects of the entire case. The system that had released him, the years between, the absence of any meaningful mechanism that could have flagged or prevented what he did to Eliza Fletcher.
The trial of Cleotha Abston took place in 2023. The evidence presented was overwhelming. DNA evidence, surveillance footage, physical evidence recovered from the vehicle and from the property where her body was found, witness testimony. The jury deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, especially aggravated kidnapping, and rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom, members of Eliza Fletcher were present, her husband Richard, members of the Orgill family, people who had known her for years, who had sat in her classroom as children, who had loved her. The verdict did not give them back what they had lost. Verdicts rarely do. But it placed a legal and permanent marker on what Cleotha Abston had done. Memphis has not forgotten Eliza Fletcher. Her school, St. Mary's Episcopal, honored her memory. People who never knew her personally felt the weight of her loss in a specific way, because there was nothing abstract about it. She was doing something completely ordinary. She was running. She was in her own neighborhood. She was a 34-year-old woman trying to carve out 30 minutes for herself before the day began. Her case became part of a broader national conversation about women jogging alone and the reality of personal safety in public spaces, about what it means to carry risk as a woman simply moving through the world at an unusual hour, about how much space women are expected to give up in order to feel safe. Those conversations did not produce easy answers either. What is clear is this: Eliza Fletcher was a person who poured herself into other people's lives, her sons, her students, her husband, her community. She had built something real and good, and she was in the middle of living it when it was taken from her. She was 34 years old. She had been out for 4 minutes, and the city of Memphis, the city she gave so much of herself to, has never stopped saying her name.